Hello and welcome to the Functionally Enlightened Podcast with Dr. Sharon Sarita. We interview well-respected medical and functional practitioners, as well as patients who have overcome disabling chronic conditions, such as dysautonomia, and reclaimed their health. These enlightened guests provide helpful tips on managing chronic pain and illnesses, using a combination of traditional and whole-body healing modalities. If you're interested in natural healing and quality of life improvement, you're in the right place. Thank you for listening to today's episode.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Functionally Enlightened Podcast. Today, we have Stephen Heuer as our guest on the show. Stephen's the founder of Synergistic Nutrition, and he brings decades of experience working with complex conditions like toxic burden, gut dysfunction, kidney disease, thyroid disorders, cardiovascular health, and even cancer recovery. His journey into this work began with his own experience of mercury poisoning from dental fillings, which led him to explore deeper biochemical approaches to healing, particularly around detoxification, mineral balance, and restoring the body's natural terrain. Today, we'll be diving into all of these principles in order to support the body in recovering from complex chronic conditions. Welcome, Stephen Heuer. We appreciate you joining us on the show.
Sharon, thanks so much for having this forum and for allowing me to be on with you. I'm always excited to share how people have many options to help their bodies heal.
For sure. So, Stephen, your work began with your own experience with mercury toxicity. Can you walk us through what happened and what ultimately led you to this field?
Yeah. When I was 15 and a half, I had 2 cavities. I had already had 7 cavities that had been replaced with mercury, the regular mercury fillings that were common in that day. And I didn't have any noticeable deleterious effects from those 7 fillings in my mouth. And then there were 2 more cavities that developed when I was 15 and a half. So I went to the dentist, and that dentist, a cat playing with something. So he basically drilled and filled them. But in that day, I learned this, of course, decades later from Hal Huggins' work and his research, the famous dentist that was about removing mercury fillings correctly so you wouldn't re-expose yourself to the vapors. And so that in that day, they were using the high copper mercury amalgams. So in that instance, the copper in a higher amount in that amalgam would cause more mercury release. And it's 50 to 100 times more mercury that came off those fillings than the typical. So those 2 fillings were like the equivalent of 100 to 200 fillings in one sitting. So I developed a sore throat while I was in the chair, the dental chair, walked out of the office, told my mom I had a sore throat. And, probably a week went by and the sore throat was still there. So my mom took me to the doctor. I got antibiotics, and I was put on antibiotics for 10 days and the sore throat did not go away. So I was put on another round of antibiotics for 10 days. Again, finally it went away. But then all of a sudden, something I'd never experienced in my life. So I'd, up to this point in time, noticed I'd been a very healthy person, very athletic, an extroverted personality. And all of a sudden my bowels stopped working. So all of a sudden, I wasn't having bowel movements. And so that it led to, and in my family, I was raised to believe that if boys complain about a physical problem, they're babies. So I didn't complain. I just kept it to myself for quite a while. So finally I complained, and my dad, they sent me to the doctor and did a barium minimum. And I didn't get to see that x-ray. I got to see it many years later when I was like 27, I think I saw it. Anyways, when I was 27, I saw it. The doctor said, you're fine. If your bowels don't move, you just need to take X-Lax. And at 16, I already thought, that's not getting at the cause. Like I'm not going to take a drug. That doesn't make sense. One thing led to another, and did some fasting, didn't fix it. Like 3 days on the Stanislaus River, I did a water fast with my brother. And then I went 4 years in a semi-starvation diet I became a Seventh-day Adventist because my dad left the family, and so Jesus became my role model as a father figure. And so for 4 years, I practiced veganism and hardly eating anything, and mostly fruit. So by age 20, I experienced adrenal exhaustion because I was trying to go to college on nothing but fumes. So I had to leave the college, and then I went to work for a Seventh-day Adventist contractor. And the first day on the job, rather than, eating. I didn't eat breakfast, of course. I didn't eat lunch. I just rested. And after lunch, I got up and I started to use a circular saw and I started to rip a 2x4. That's going the direction of the grain, which is really dangerous. And you never, even experienced carpenters don't do it. So basically, you don't want to hold the 2x4 in your hand while the blade's circularly spinning next to your fingers. So I did that and it kicked back and cut my thumb off. And 3 hours later, I had it sewn back on, but it was like forever deformed. Can't bend it. But I got workman's compensation for the next year. So it was like $240 a month for 12 months. And that was a blessing in disguise, losing my thumb, because I got to do this cleanse that I'd been reading about, but didn't have the money or the time to do it. So I did a 10-day carrot juice, grape juice fast with wheatgrass juice tablets, beet juice tablets, and I mixed some of the juices up with clay and psyllium drink. And so that would gel up really quick. You drink it down before it gels up, goes through your intestinal tract, acts like a broom and a magnet to pull things out. After 10 days of that, I got rid of all this old tire rubber fecal matter and I felt reborn and happy to be alive again. But then I still always had constipation. Even though I ate perfect, ate raw, vegetarian, whatever, it still was slow and feeling bloated all the time. So it wasn't until 1996, I believe it was, and I took a training with Dietrich Klinghardt, and I'd had my mercury fillings removed in 91, and I did a mercury detox homeopathically with a chiropractor that was testing me with electrodermal screening technology. And after 6 weeks, he said, "Mercury's no longer a problem. You're fine." But I didn't feel any better. Everything was still problematic. And it wasn't until this training with Dietrich Klinghardt that he said, "Here's all the symptoms of mercury toxicity." I had like 97% of those symptoms. I said, I still have mercury, obviously. So I did DMPS and DMSA for 9 months. And in the 9th month, my bowels started working 75% normal for the first time in 24 years. And then it took 2.5 more decades to fix it all right. So the microbiome was healed, the nerves grew back permanently, and I had normal elimination. So in that journey, I got a nutritional degree, became a naturopath is what they called it, school out of Arizona. And they focused on the work of Dr. Kay Reams, famous soil biologist that figured out biochemistry of the body and how to look at the urine, salt levels, ammonia levels, sugar levels, and the saliva pH, and come up with this mathematical equation of how imbalanced you were. So anyways, yeah, been studying this doing this for 36 years. Yeah, I've had a lot of troubles along the way. I got a herpes viral infection on my lip from a lip balm, contaminated lip balm. And that led to my hair loss, chronic fatigue syndrome. And now that I'm older, I'm 65, I've learned that, it makes your body more prone to cancer. So I developed prostate cancer, breast cancer, got rid of those, and it's just like, it's been nonstop. Like this is my mission in life: get sick, figure out how to fix it, help others do the same.
That is pretty extensive in terms of the amount of traumas you've experienced, just physically, and I'm sure emotionally there too, with some of the adverse childhood events that you kind of touched on. I know with myself having gone through a chronic healing journey, we really have to learn to advocate for ourselves and continue lifelong research, as you mentioned. So I kind of want to rewind back to a couple of episodes that you had just discussed. So the fruitarianism that you went through, what was the basis for trialing that, and how long were you on that type of meal plan or diet before you transitioned, and then where were you heading afterwards?
So I tried fruitarianism. I read a book by Arnold Ehret called The Mucusless Diet Healing System, and another one called Rational Fasting when I was 16. And he cured himself of his ailments. He had, I think it was kidney disease. They call it Bright's disease back then. And he basically did fasting and ate fruit and got his health back, and all his hair grew back in, and became an evangelist for the subject over some period of time back there in the early 1900s. And just all the experiences that he talked about in the book, and how when people were fasting and broke the fast, all this mucus would come out. They'd have, like, sometimes one guy that stuttered all the time, he basically went on this fast with Arnold Ehret. And after, I don't know, 5-10 days, whatever it was getting hard for this guy with his new, first time he's fasting, it's hard for him. So they broke the fast on some fruit. And after he ate some fresh figs, he started to have mucus expectoration out of his eyes, sinuses, mouth, and ears. And after all the mucus came out, all his stuttering was gone. And things like that were so impressive that, I felt like, and then I had a strong belief that the Genesis story in the Bible was a factual account, not a metaphorical account. But I think differently now. But at the time, I believed that there was this ideal fruit diet. So the fruit, the Bible says in Genesis, the fruit of the tree shall be meat for you. And so with that information, I just thought this could possibly heal me. So I emphasize fruit a lot because with my awful transit time and constipation issues, fruit wouldn't putrefy and fruit wouldn't make me feel toxic and have a bad breath and all these things. So for 4 years, I ate a lot of fruit as my food, as opposed to building foods. I should have been on building foods, meats and fats, because that was my developmental years, 16 to 20. So I didn't do that, and it was just to compensate. Then I tried a brief trip to Hawaii. I went to Molokai Island, and I did a fruitarian diet for several weeks, where there's this guy that had a farm on the East End, and you could trade your labor for food. And so you could get papayas and mangoes and pineapples and, basically have as much fruit as you want and nuts. And so I did that. And very quickly, I just had no energy. I got really fatigued. And then my teeth, it's like I had to leave from that. And then I came back to Hawaii. I went back to California. And then I came back to Hawaii like a year or two later. And I tried another 6-month stint of it. And I started to lose my teeth, even though I was doing some wheatgrass juice and lots of fruit. And, but I still, at the end of 6 months, all my teeth were super sensitive to sweet or cold. And so I read a book on how to heal the enamel. I did that. And basically you have to keep your mouth really clean so that at night when you go to bed, you don't have any food particles on it, so that your saliva in your mouth at night is able to remineralize your enamel. And so that's what happened, and they got better. And I did lots of wheatgrass juice, and I held the wheatgrass juice in my mouth for like minutes at a time because I felt that would help remineralize my teeth. It probably did, because they got better. And so eventually I had to go back to the mainland and couldn't have access to all this fruit, and started eating meat again. And and then I discovered that basically if I ate the meat rare, I would get strength and energy from it. But if I ate it fully cooked, I felt tired, and it didn't give me energy, and it constipated me more. Mm-hmm. So I've always eaten my meat rare now because of that. So yeah. So I drink raw milk now. I eat meats, but lightly cooked. I eat a lot of plant foods when I crave them. I eat some nut yogurts. I soak nuts. I start them germinating. I puree them in water, and then I add a probiotic. And then that nut yogurt is like the ultimate gut food, because the beneficial bacteria in the yogurt, and there's specific strains that I use, they don't die off because they're feeding on the fiber that's found in the nuts. And when you just do regular milk yogurt, the microorganisms that you're using to make the yogurt have exhausted their food supply. Their lactose is converted into lactic acid by the time you finish making the yogurt. So the populations begin to decline. And then when you consume it, there's no food source for them. So they're good for the small intestine, but not really for the large intestine. If you want to get the large intestine re-inoculated, then you would take yogurt and dilute good yogurt that's got human strains in it that'll actually colonize your gut. And you would dilute that 50% with water, and then you give yourself an enema. And then you retain that for 20 minutes or so, and then you've inoculated your large bowel to a degree. But the best results I've had is with the yogurt, the nut yogurt, because it seems like that the fiber and the proteins and fats in the nuts are providing a constant full spectrum food supply to the microorganisms, so they don't die off as they transit through the intestines. And my brother, who he's 67, and he just cured his chronic constipation for the first time in his life doing this nut yogurt formula that I taught him. And it took about 8 months. But now the organisms are established. They've produced enough butyrate and other short-chain fatty acids, so they've healed the mucosal lining. They've thickened the circular muscular tubing, so the peristalsis power is stronger. Mm-hmm. And they've healed up any holes in the gut, and the villi are longer now, so you can absorb better. So the nut yogurt is pretty profound what it can do for your gut.
Mm-hmm. And I love that food first approach, because we can supplement. And then, like you said, if it's an intermediate time, we can see improvement in the microbiome. However, there's a consistency that's needed, a lifelong process where we have to keep refeeding. Once we've wiped out some of the gut microbiome, it's not going to be able to stay present in the environment unless you're constantly fortifying that area. So a couple of things that you mentioned, we talked about different types of diets that you follow and reintroduction of animal protein there. And so just to emphasize that there's a specific diet that works best for each person. And that doesn't mean there's one diet. That means individualized approach. Some people need to adjust the micronutrient ratio or macronutrient ratios. Some people do really well with an increased amount of protein, specifically animal protein for the amino acid profile. But can you talk to us a little bit about what you see with people that you're working with nowadays when you're looking at detoxification processes?
Yeah, so basically the small intestine, basically every cell of the body is supposed to have 10% of its protein content as glutathione if it's healthy. And glutathione is the master chemical for detoxification. I mean, there's other ones too. You've got, phase one, cytochrome P450 pathways, first step, and then you've got the glucuronidation and glutathione and the sulfur amino acids for the second step. And then the third step is where the hepatocytes, the liver cells, actually exude the toxin out of their cell structure and into the biliary ducts for bile creation. But some research that I read a while back, Christopher Shade's research, he introduced it to me, says that, and this is what happened to me too, is that if you can be taking like all the detox stuff you want, the cilantro, the chlorella, nanonized chlorella, zeolites, but that's a really slow way to get detoxified. You really get the best results if you can turn on glutathione production throughout your whole body. So I found that is accomplished when you get rid of gut inflammation and you're taking the appropriate nutrients that upregulate glutathione production. So part of that's detoxing your liver, but fixing the gut microbiome is again coming back. So when you've got these pathogens, previous antibiotic usage, everybody's used antibiotics pretty much in America. So they've destroyed all these different organisms that won't come back unless you reseed them. So, but the reseeding process, there's a lot of products out there, but I found that there's only one that's the human strains that's the full spectrum. But before you can introduce that one, you have to put some police in there. And so based on the work of William Davis, I think it is,
the wheat belly?
Yeah, cardiologist. So former cardiologist, cardiac surgeon, saw that most all disease was coming from the GI tract. And so he then diverted his medical practice over to this focus on fixing the GI tract. So he's written real good books, and he's basically come up with these 3 strains of probiotics, and they're specific versions. So if you have 7 versions of L. reuteri, he's specifically talking about one version of L. reuteri to colonize from the mouth all the way to the anus, this organism. And this organism does all these things, but its primary purpose is to produce bacteriocins. And so those bacteriocins kill off the fungus and the pathogenic bacteria so that the human indigenous strains that can colonize the gut can grow back when you reintroduce them. But he goes with these 3 strains. So one of them is L. reuteri, one of them is L. gasseri, and one of them is Bacillus coagulans. And you make a yogurt out of those 3, and then you eat that for a month to kill off the bad guys in the gut. Then you he just says switch to a full spectrum human strain probiotic, but he doesn't tell you what that is. I've done this for a long time trying to fix the gut, and the one that's the best one that I carry is called Progurt. So Progurt's the full spectrum human strain. So now you start making these nut yogurts out of the Progurt. And because Progurt's expensive, you can actually take some milk, like a quart of milk or a pint of milk, and pour some of the probiotic in there, first having killed the milk organisms, sterilize it first with heat, and then inoculate with the Progurt, turn that into a yogurt. Now you could use 2 tablespoons of that to make every quart of nut or seed yogurt. And you've got a supply there for a while, for like a good month. That'll extend so 1 box can last you a year of Progurt probiotic. What was your first question though?
I can't recall the question, but I do want to jump in on this where you're talking about reseeding the gut with the specific microbiome.
Detox. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. And then I do want to go into the oxalate breakdown. So we have Oxalobacter formigenes, and that has been shown to not be able to be reseeded. Have you seen any evidence otherwise, or have you seen any improvements in that specific strain?
The Oxalobacter formigenes is the one that I've chosen to work with because it's supposedly the strongest to break down. There's other ones too. I mean, you've got L. salivarius and you've got a variety of other ones that all do break down oxalates. But because I've had oxalate sensitivity, I focused on that and I started to work with this product, get from India, Oxalobacter formigenes. And so I'll open up 2 capsules of that and I'll add that to the quart of nut or seed yogurt along with the probiotic that I'm using. And then that grows up in the nut or seed yogurt. And I don't have any scientific information on how well it colonizes the gut, but I know that I'm not reacting like I used to oxalates. So my gut seems to be colonized with the Oxalobacter formigenes because in the past, when I would eat a nut or seed yogurt in the early days, it'd be really problematic. I'd have a reaction. Mm-hmm. So that's my recommendation for solving the sensitivity to, because if you look at it, all herbivores eat nothing but grass as their food source for putting on a muscular body. And so they're eating tons of oxalates in the grass. And, previous cultures, whether it's the Hunza people or whoever, lots of oxalate rich foods and they're thriving people. So I think we're supposed to be able to handle oxalates, but we've lost the ability to do that in large part because of previous antibiotic usage. So we have to focus on getting all the strains in there that do break down oxalates. Yes. So as far as detox that I didn't finish on earlier, so getting rid of the inflammation in the small intestine then upregulates phase 2 liver detox. So then you end up upregulating glutathione production. And then you definitely, I take something called, or I recommend people take something called Continual G. You ever heard of that?
I have not.
And so this one company figured out that the first step in the body's efforts to make glutathione is the bringing together of cysteine and glutamic acid. And it's the rate limiting step, which means that it's the hardest step for the body to complete. Mm-hmm. And then the second step of bringing the glycine in there is the easy step. So they figured out if they could just take and combine those 2 amino acids into this dipeptide and put it into a flavored powder and people drink it, that they could increase glutathione. So they did. And they did. They increased glutathione above physiological norms, which is the first. Nobody else has done that. You could take liposomal glutathione, you could take acetylglutathione all day long, and you'll never raise glutathione above physiological norms. You'll just complement your deficiency a little bit. This raises it above physiological norms, which is the body saying it's now safe because we're neutralizing all these free radicals from physiological homeostasis levels. But because we're up and above that, we can now grab all these toxins out of the body. So anyways, that's the product that I recommend people take, along with the full spectrum macro mineral supplement. It's got selenium in it. So I carry something called, it's a pure encapsulation product called Mineral 650. And if you do 3 capsules of that twice a day, you'll get a good amount of these essential macro minerals the food supply is deficient in, with selenium being one of them. And that selenium is needed for your body to make glutathione. And it's also needed for your thyroid function, so you can convert inactive T4 to T3. So then the whole body needs to be upregulated in its ability to metabolize things. So I recommend these liver flushes, these castor oil liver flushes. And so the instructions for that are on a little document on my website. But that's the most effective liver flush I've ever done. You literally feel better after you've had your first or second bowel movement from the effects of it. Way better than the olive oil flushes. I've done tons of the olive oil flushes, and the castor oil flush is superior. Because your body can't absorb any of the castor oil. So all the bile that comes out to try and assimilate it, to try and emulsify it, stays trapped in this castor oil and comes out in your bowel movements. And as it exits, you go, wow, all my energy's coming back. So liver flushes, along with fixing your thyroid function. So I get people onto much higher dosages of iodine and iodide to do that. So when you get your thyroid working, you get your liver detoxified, you get your bowels are clean, you've got a good microbiome, and there's no inflammation. Then your body, and you take things that raise glutathione, and then you take binders to help them stay in the intestines, like pectosol, modified citrus pectin, and toxin binder by Global Healing. Any of those will do. You take those at the beginning of a meal. because at the beginning of the meal, that'll mean that the first thing that the bile comes in contact with when food exits the stomach is the binder. So now all the heavy metals, chemical toxins, whatever, are going to bind to the binder and come out in the stool. So that's a short synopsis of, how to assist your body in detoxifying mercury or aluminum, or, the big one is aluminum, because we all have chemtrails. We've all been inhaling chemtrails, So aluminum is really high in chemtrails, and so we've all been inhaling that. And this guy that's done all these studies in Europe has shown from his blood analyses, all the aluminum in everybody's body is 100 times above normal. And so I recommend people do this silica supplement. It's like patented method of reducing silica down to 100% assimilable state, and silica displaces the aluminum, so it comes out in the urine and in the bowel. So that's another one that I recommend. And yeah,
and you're mentioning now the aluminum, that has a +2 charge. So we're thinking about minerals that can displace. And I know you emphasize the importance of macro and trace minerals. So for our audience, Stephen, if you don't mind, can you talk about how mineral balance influences the overall health, and especially in chronic illness in our community where people are dealing with Asia syndrome, which was induced by implants?
Yeah. So basically, trace minerals are needed by the body to make, depending on which text you read, up to 75,000 different metabolic enzymes. And so enzymes are protein structures that require a mineral to activate them and make them function. So every single function in the body is a metabolic enzyme end process, whether it's your thyroid function, whether it's your glutathione production, or whether it's your neurotransmitter production, whether it's your muscles, whatever it is, everything requires metabolic enzymes. So there's some people out there that say, and I've got a book called Minerals for the Genetic Code by the late Charles Walters and a chiropractor named Dr. Ulrey. So they correlate in that book that the body needs 64 trace minerals to activate 64 codons of the DNA. And so if you look at the longest lived people, even if you don't have enough scientific evidence studies to back this up, you just look at Joe Wallach's research, the famous Dead Doctors Don't Lie veterinarian guy. He's the guy that popularized trace minerals way back in the early 90s and stuff. So, he did all this, they've documented all this research on animals, animal husbandry. So if they raise turkeys on a concrete platform where they don't get access to dirt and they're just eating their feed, they're deficient in copper and they develop aneurysms and rupture and die. Their blood vessels rupture and die. So they introduce the copper and that problem goes away. So like all these different diseases that happen for different animals that are raised in animal husbandry for their food sources, they've discovered. And so they know there's these basic minimum amount of nutrients that are required for the gestation, for the conception and gestation of healthy animals. So it's no different for the human body. And the longest lived people on the planet are the Hunza people that live in between Pakistan and Turkey. They drink glacial snowmelt water that's so full of calcium and trace minerals that you can't see through it. They call it glacial milk. It's a white gray water. So they have no crime, they have no police, they have no courts, they have no problems, okay? And they have no diseases. And they live to be 120 to 140 years of age, free of all disease. And then there's various spots on the planet where also these long-lived people, Vilcabamban Ecuadorians, Azerbaijanis, and different places on the planet, they also have this mineral-rich water they drink, and they irrigate their fields with. So the evidence is overwhelming that the human body needs a broad spectrum of both, not only all the macro minerals that are needed in larger amounts, but all the trace minerals. And colloidal minerals is one way to get them. There's different ways to get them. There's a rock powder that I have that's called Mineral Magic. It's the combination of volcanic ash and an inland seabed from eons ago. And it's got paramagnetic minerals in it. You can take that, and people typically have a noticeable improvement in energy. If they have any gray hair, that starts to reverse sometimes. And if you're in your reproductive years, men in particular notice their reproductive energy gets much stronger. And if you listen to Joel Wallach on this information from years ago, it's like when you conceive a child and the 23 chromosomes to come together to create a new human being, you have the development of a new human being that's growing faster than a cancer can grow. growing faster than a fast-growing cancer can grow. And so there's a certain amount, there's a lot of nutrients that are needed because the body's laying down these, he calls them metal fingers, whereby there's going to be a decision on the body's part. If there's enough of this nutrient, we'll develop the adrenals in an optimal manner, or the kidneys in an optimal manner, or the thyroid in an optimal manner, or the eyes, or the brain, or whatever it is. It's getting its instructions to develop at a certain genetic expression based on the nutrient supply that's available, some of which is minerals. So if those minerals aren't there, then the body ends up going, okay, well, we don't have enough of the right nutrients to develop this fully. So we're going to subtract from that because we want the whole organism to be completed in its development before it's born. So it's born alive and healthy to the best of its ability. But, that's why, wide jawbone people. So if you have a wide jawbone, you have no crowded teeth, and you don't need your wisdom teeth pulled, you have a slightly larger sinuses, and you also have a slightly larger skull, that's because you got vitamin K2 as minoquinone 4. There was enough of that available in your mom's diet while you were being gestated, and then even while you were being breastfed, because that's the vitamin that determines your skeletal development and your jawbone size. And so lots of people didn't get that, so they developed narrower jawbones, narrower sinuses, smaller skulls. And so we have to have our wisdom teeth pulled and all this nonsense because we didn't get enough vitamin K2. Particularly, it's vitamin A, D, and K2 all together. Mm-hmm. And it's the K2 in the body that's needed for the child development is minoquinone 4, not minoquinone 7. Minoquinone 7 is good for other things, but it doesn't. They've done studies on the placenta, and they found that the placenta doesn't contain any K2 as minoquinone 7. It contains only minoquinone 4. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's a plan. You can actually improve each generation so that you breed out any physical defects or tendencies for a disease to occur. It takes like 3 or more generations for that to happen, eating perfectly and having all the nutrients there. But it is doable. And that's been part of my motivation, is because, if you want to have a sane society and a free society, free human beings that are sovereigns, that are truly motivated to and able and acting upon to take care of themselves wisely, and they're stewards of the earth wisely, so they're taking care of the soil fertility and stuff. That's when you create peace on earth, when you have sane people. And so, yeah.
Stephen, you're imparting so much wisdom. I wish we could dive into each one of these topics so much more. The preconception is so foundational, as you mentioned. I don't know, the generations that my generation, the generation prior, just the exposure of the toxicity without the knowledge, without the resources of what we can do to pre-tox and detox lifelong to make sure we're absorbing our nutrients, eating the proper diet, improving function of the digestion, and all of those things. Immune response, really big, but it's all wrapped into one. Really, it's about decreasing in functional diagnostic nutrition. We talk about the metabolic chaos. So decreasing all of those toxic burdens that are in our body, emotional, physical, mental, and I think I said emotional already, but you get the picture here. Just decreasing that toxic burden in our lives, and then just providing that information. Hopefully generations to come are wizened to staying away from the standard American diet and all of the processed foods, all of the fast conveniences that we strive to get now because we don't have time, right? We have occupied every space and time with the digital era, with all of the technology and, checking emails at every point of the day. So just, there's so much in this. And I love that you were talking about ancestral cultures where they have all of this nutrition kind of just as a standard for them. And so now, thinking about our audience today and family members of those who are dealing with implant illness and other chronic conditions, what are a couple of things that someone who's dealing with the chronic symptoms, what are a couple of things they can do today to begin their healing journey?
So it's like I said earlier, it's a combination of, and you were saying too, it's a combination of detoxing, but your body's not going to detox easily until the gut's healed. So, I've written a book or a report on this called How to Heal Leaky Gut, or How to Heal a Gut. And it's on my website, synergisticnutrition.com. In the report section, there's a tab called Reports at the top. You click on that and you'll get access to that report. And then there's another one called Advanced Mercury Toxic Metal Halide and Drug Detoxification Protocol Report, so that you understand how to do that in a non-toxic manner, because I don't advocate DMPS and DMSA anymore. Even that's what I did. That's hard on your kidneys. You're damaging your kidneys to a degree from doing that. So it's the different detox protocol in that report. And, I mean, I've been through all this stuff. And so I've recorded it in these 2 reports, and I've got other reports too, like cardiovascular health and what's the other, kidney. I've had people reverse kidney failure and get off dialysis. So I work with a lot of different things, and nutrient wise, but I also work with peptides. So when your body's more deteriorated, you're older, and your ability to create proteins for repairing is declined. I bring in peptides, injectable peptides, because those have been life-saving and, really, really improve quality of life and health in multiple ways. So yeah, and then just as far as your diet goes, I mean, just eat like grass-fed, if it's whatever the meats are, organic and grass-fed. And I recommend, if you're dealing with inflammation, to not dry heat cook them, because dry heat cooking creates more advanced glycation end products and some carcinogens that are inflammatory. So if you cook it in water, none of that will happen. You won't have those carcinogens. You won't have those advanced glycation end products. So steam it or boil it. The less you cook it, the better. Raw milk, if you get access to it, if you can tolerate it. If you don't tolerate it, in time, you'll probably be able to, like as you heal your leaky gut, because I used to have a severe reaction to raw milk and now I don't. So in time you just got to heal your gut. And then just basically let nature be your teacher, and look at nature and ask how does nature doing it? And then that's a better teacher in many instances than textbooks, because a lot of times it's like the information on a study on a product ends up being showing you, like, it'll do all this stuff in a animal setting or in a petri dish setting, but there's so many other things going on in the body that it doesn't end up achieving those results in the body. So you're putting money in a direction that's not necessarily, you might spend years taking products, but your quality of life is still not optimal. And it's because it's a whole body thing. If you have any root canals, so root canals are infected teeth, no matter what anybody teaches you. You can get a book called Root Canal Cover Up, and it'll teach you this. Every single tooth has 1 million microtubules, and so you end up with an infection in the 1 million microtubules, and then that shuts off the circuit to an organ. So every tooth is connected to an organ through an energetic channel, and if the tooth is infected because of a root canal, then that circuit is shut off, and the energy going to that organ is now depressed. And that's another thing. Basically, the electrical component of the body. Your cells have to be minus 25 millivolts on the membrane to be healthy. But if you have disease, they've dropped below that. They're now minus 20, minus 15, minus 10. When they get into the plus ranges, they get really sick. When they get into plus 30, they're a tumor cell. And so there's a way to increase the voltage of the cell with proper nutrients. Like, Mercola's out there teaching everybody that you don't want any seed oils. And him and Georgie Dinkoff are demeaning and saying that they're causing problems to your cell's ability to burn carbohydrates. And so I go, well, that doesn't make any sense, because Joanna Budwig cured 90% of her people with cancer in the 1950s, giving them 6 tablespoons of flaxseed oil mixed with a cup of cottage cheese and a plant-based diet. And so the flaxseed oil was restoring the cell membrane's ability to have this minus 25 millivolt charge. And she had not only cancer go away, but she had arthritis go away. She had cardiovascular disease go away on this diet, because the cell membranes require omega-3 and omega-6 in their unoxidized state on a regular basis. And they're called essential because your body can't make them. You have to get them from the diet. And so that's the best way to get them, is the raw nuts and seeds that you turn into your yogurt. And if you need more supplementally, you can buy cold-pressed flax oil or cold-pressed walnut oil.
Yep, definitely. And so a couple of things before we end off here. There's people who suspect leaky gut or intestinal permeability, however you want to say it. And there are functional lab tests that can be used to assess to what degree. So the GI map is one, the stool analysis. Also, we have mucosal barrier assessments that can tell you the zonulin family peptides. So the leaky gut can be measured in that. Also looking at intolerances, so histamine versus diamine oxidase, those ratios are critical. It's not just about a marker, it's about the ratios and about the clinical correlation with each individual. So this is why I recommend always working with a qualified practitioner, finding someone who is well-versed in, your particular field. Although a lot of the disease, a lot of the chronic conditions do resemble each other, and there's always some underlying condition that can be treated with the overall approaches of functional health. So diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, and proper supplementation. So with that, Stephen, again, we appreciate you joining us on the show. Again, so many topics here, beautifully introduced, and I wish we could dedicate more time to each one of these. So maybe in the future we could do another episode or so. So for our audience who wants to learn a little bit more about the resources you provide, where can they find you?
Synergisticnutrition.com is one site. So Synergistic, Synergistic nutrition.com. I have another website dedicated to teaching people how to restore bone density and reverse gum recession and heal their teeth if they're still alive and just compromised. And it's called getbonesofsteel.com, getbonesofsteel.com, STEEL.
Okay, very good. Thank you for sharing that. We will put it in our resources in our show notes here. So you can check on your favorite podcasting platform or on YouTube for those resources. Stephen, again, thank you so much. And to our audience, thank you for joining us today. Please like, subscribe, share this episode if it resonated with you. And then if you know anyone who would benefit from the information shared here. Thank you so much. And we'll see you on the next one.